Welcome to this explainer. You know, when we think of historical titans, especially those carved into monument stone, it is incredibly easy to picture them as fully formed from birth, just destined for greatness without ever stumbling. But today, we're going to look right past the marble and the myth. We are going to explore the origin story of a boy from Atlanta, Georgia, and discover how a very human, very complex youth shaped the absolute icon we know today. Just listen to this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. It absolutely shatters the perception of him as just a peaceful, stoic figure. That night will never leave my memory. It was the angriest I've ever been in my life. The man whose very legacy is synonymous with nonviolent resistance was, at his core, deeply familiar with profound visceral anger. He experienced intense rage at the injustices of his world. But where did this specific anger come from? And honestly, how did he learn to channel it? To figure that out, we have to rewind the clock. We're going to explore the visceral, inciting incidents of his youth, the trauma, the defiance, and those quiet moments of resilience that built the foundation of his character. We want to find the exact moments that a boy named Michael transformed into the defining voice of a generation.
Section 1. The Icon and the Movement.
Before we dive into his childhood, we really have to ground ourselves in the sheer scale of what he accomplished as an adult. The Civil Rights Act and the Nobel Peace Prize in '64, the Voting Rights Act in '65, the Fair Housing Act in '68. These are world-changing legislative milestones that dismantled Jim Crow laws. But the seeds for these massive societal shifts, they weren't planted in the halls of Washington. They were planted much, much earlier, inside a two-story home in Georgia. Section 2. Becoming Martin Luther King. To find those seeds of resistance, we are heading back to Atlanta on January 15, 1929, when a boy was born to a Baptist pastor and his wife. He was actually born Michael King Jr. That was his name for the first 5 years of his life. But in 1934, his dad, Michael Sr., traveled across the globe to Germany. While he was there, he learned all about the Reformation leader Martin Luther. He was so inspired by this historical figure's willingness to stand up against unchecked power that the father came home and literally changed both of their names. Michael Sr. became Martin Luther King Sr., and young Michael Jr. became Martin Luther King Jr. It wasn't just a name swap. It was the passing of an ideological torch. And this ideological shift was heavily fueled by exactly what his father witnessed on that trip. In 1934, Martin Sr. was at the 5th Congress of the Baptist World Alliance in Berlin, right during the rise of Nazism. Witnessing that dark, terrifying shift, the Congress adopted a fierce resolution, a declaration condemning all racial animosity, oppression, and discrimination as a direct violation of the law of God, explicitly calling out discrimination against Jews and colored people worldwide. Bringing this bold, anti-oppressive theology back to Atlanta planted the very first seeds of activism in young Martin's home. Section 3. Childhood Trauma and Resilience. Now, that childhood home wasn't just a place of theological debate. It was also a place of strict discipline and shocking personal trauma. His father regularly disciplined the kids with whippings, but check out what his dad said about him. He'd stand there and the tears would run down and he'd never cry. Even as a little kid, Martin Jr. possessed this peculiar, incredible resilience. The physical pain was there, the tears fell, but he flat out refused to cry out. He was already building an internal fortress. But beneath that fortress was an intense emotional depth that took a near-tragic turn. Young Martin carried this terribly heavy burden of guilt. Once, his brother A.D. accidentally slid down a banister and knocked their grandmother unconscious. Little Martin truly believed she was dead, and blaming himself entirely, he actually attempted suicide by jumping from a second-story window. He survived, thankfully. But incredibly, this wasn't an isolated incident. Years later, in 1941, while he secretly snuck away to watch a parade, his grandmother tragically died of a heart attack. Convinced his deception caused God to take her, the grieving boy jumped from that window a second time. Surviving that and going through his father's deep counseling marked a grueling emotional crucible for the young boy. Section 4. First Encounters with Segregation. Outside the walls of his home, the brutal reality of a segregated America was waiting to shape his worldview. At just 6 years old, Martin faced a heartbreaking rejection. He had a white playmate, but when they started at separate, segregated schools, the white boy's parents abruptly forbade their friendship. They coldly told him, "We are white, and you are colored." When his parents had to sit him down and explain the horrific history of slavery and racism, King later admitted it made him determined to hate every single white person. But here is the critical pivot. His parents stepped in right then and there. They taught him that his Christian duty was to love everyone. That set the stage for his entire lifelong philosophy of nonviolent love in the face of hatred.
We can really see this taking shape during a visceral encounter where young Martin watched his father actively stand up against segregation. They had walked into a downtown Atlanta shoe store. The clerk immediately walked up and demanded they move to the back of the store to be served. Martin Sr., completely unbothered by the societal expectations of the Jim Crow South, firmly refused to comply.
Delivering his words with absolute authority, Martin Sr. told the clerk, "We'll either buy shoes sitting here or we won't buy any shoes at all." And he immediately walked out of the store with his son. He later told young Martin, "I don't care how long I have to live with this system, I will never accept it." This brilliantly illustrates the exact same defiance that led Martin Sr. to lead hundreds in a voting rights march back in 1936. He was showing young Martin, up close, how to resist a system with a dignity that refused to bend.
Section 5. Finding his voice.
As he transitioned into adolescence, Martin Jr. began to forge his own complex identity, and it was full of delightful contradictions. The crucial point here is that before he was a stoic icon in black and white history books, he was just a remarkably vibrant, normal youth. While he'd sometimes get into physical altercations, he cleverly learned to use his massive vocabulary to talk his way out of fights. Yet, despite reading dictionaries for fun, he had zero interest in spelling and constantly relied on his sister Christine for help. They nicknamed him Tweed, or Tweety, because he loved rocking sharp tweed suits and patent leather shoes. He sang baritone opera, joined the debate team, and loved dancing. He was totally known as the best jitterbug in town. He was just so fully alive and social. But intellectually, he was advancing at a truly unbelievable pace. Thanks to his incredibly sharp mind, he enrolled at the Atlanta University Laboratory School for the 7th grade when he was just 11 years old. By age 13, his trajectory skyrocketed. He became the youngest assistant manager of a newspaper delivery station for the Atlanta Journal, skipped the 9th grade entirely, and get this is the age when he bravely started questioning the literalist religious teachings of his own father's church. Right in Sunday school, at just 13, he openly denied the bodily resurrection of Jesus. He was feeling deep doubts, unable to identify with the emotional displays of the congregation. He was rapidly developing his own highly analytical, critical mind. Section 6. The Path to Morehouse. Naturally, this rapid intellectual maturity was bound to collide with the systemic racism of the era, culminating in a climax that would forever alter his trajectory. In his junior year of high school, King stepped up to the podium for an oratorical contest and gave his first public speech. The words were incredibly powerful. He proclaimed to the audience, "Black America still wears chains. The finest Negro is at the mercy of the meanest white man." With his commanding delivery, he rightfully won the contest. But the triumph of that day was immediately crushed by reality. On the bus ride home from that very contest, the white driver called King a horrific slur and ordered him and his teacher to stand up so that white passengers could sit. Bound by the law, his teacher urged him to comply, and they stood for the rest of that agonizing journey to Atlanta. This is the exact moment that sparked the deep, burning anger we mentioned at the start of this explainer. But rather than let that fury destroy him, he channeled it directly into his intellect. That same year, taking advantage of a wartime enrollment program, he passed his college entrance exams. And at just 15 years old, when most kids are just starting high school, King stepped onto the campus of Morehouse College. The boy named Michael, who had jumped from a window in despair, had fully transformed into a fierce, brilliantly intelligent young man prepared for the battles ahead. He was ready to learn the philosophies that would help him dismantle the very system he promised his father he would never accept.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to reflect on a question. How does understanding the trauma, the jitterbugging, the profound guilt, the fiery anger, and the immense resilience of a boy named Michael change how you view the icon of the civil rights movement? It is so easy to look at a statue and just see perfection. But knowing the raw, humanizing origins of Martin Luther King Jr., knowing that his lifelong commitment to nonviolent resistance was forged not in an absence of anger, but in the total mastery of it, makes his achievements infinitely more extraordinary. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next explainer.